taking the time to join me today. I'm going to go over a few of the changes that we've made to our report cards at Raymond Elementary School. And because we know the longer the video is, the less likely people are to make their way through it. So we're going to jump right into this. First of all, the main reason that we've made a change to our report cards is because Alberta Education has asked that our report cards go digital. So you'll see us slowly moving towards PowerSchool throughout the year, and we'll likely be there as we get into next year. They've asked that our report cards are digitally sent home and that they're also stored digitally. So that's one of the main changes that you'll see this year. But as we've made this move to PowerSchool, we've noticed a few other things as part of our report card that we've wanted to change along the way. So I'm going to start off by talking about outcome-based report cards in general to begin with. So in education, it's a little funny because teachers have this dual role with the curriculum. So we're given a curriculum to teach, and we actually have a role to facilitate learning. And then on the other side of it, part of our role is to also be the one that assesses how well that learning was for students. And so I'm going to more talk about the assessment side of this and what that looks like. But what an outcome-based report card is when you look at a curriculum from the government, you'll have a subject, for example, math, and math will be broken down into here's all the things that a student should be able to learn by the end of this year. And they're grouped. And so rather than just saying on a report card math and giving an assessment for math as a whole, we actually are saying in math, here's the main things that they should be learning this year, and then here's their assessment on those main things. And the idea behind that is actually to give more information to parents so that in math you can see where a strength is and where maybe an area for growth is, and it'll give you more information about that one subject, about your child. Now, whenever there's a report card and trying to write down our information about assessment, there's always challenges to communicate this to make sure that what we are trying to say is understood properly by the people reading the report card. So I want to point out 3 challenges that happen with these report cards that we're hoping becomes clear as you go through and read these report cards. The first challenge I'm going to talk about is actually how to calculate the goal. The reason why this is hard is because that there are different ways to calculate the goal. You could look at the average. So you take, if a student does more than one assignment on an outcome, you can look at how they did on all those different assignments, and then you can average that to say, okay, most of the time they're showing that they are achieving the goal. Another way that you could look at it is you could decide which indicator is showing up most of the time. And so even though on a couple of the assignments the students show that they're not meeting the requirements of the curriculum, on most of the assignments they were showing that they were either meeting the curriculum or even getting to the point of excelling within that curriculum and mastering it. The last way that you could make a calculation is you could actually look at just the most recent one. And so if students were struggling with an outcome to begin with and then they worked their way up to mastery, you might not want to look at average of all those because the most accurate picture is the one that's happened most recently. Now, teachers actually have the professional discretion to be able to make the choice of which one they want to use on there. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask your teacher which one that they were using. And to be honest, a lot of times it's a professional judgment as they contemplate all 3 of those different ways to calculate. Yes, the next challenge to communicate is the timing. The curriculum is actually set up to say, here's what a student should be able to know at the end of the year. And so as you are instructing a student, sometimes we look at instruction as we teach one outcome, we assess it, and then we move on to the next one and we go through there. And it's actually better if we can figure out a way to loop through outcomes and come back to them and review them often, because it sets up the best scenario for learning. And so what we try to do is look at, here's the outcome for what they should know by the end of the year, and what's our expectation for where they should be at the reporting period for the year. So this first one is at the end of November, and then we have another in March. So in November, what's our expectation for student understanding at that point? And then where are they in accordance to that expectation? And we'll talk about expectations a little bit later. And the last thing that makes it really difficult to communicate is scale. Now, to be honest, this is the one that actually brings up the most emotion. It brings it up mostly in the school, and it brings it up with parents as well. We want to be able to have a scale that communicates the best for those outcomes about how well they're understanding it. And there are lots of different types of scales. Percentages is a scale. We use a different scale here that's that we'll update and show you in the next video. There's things called Likert scales. There's the old traditional letters A, B, C, D, F. And what the challenge is to be able to find a scale that best communicates how well a student is doing with an outcome. And sometimes it's difficult because it's not just how well are they understanding the content, it's how well are they doing the skills that the curriculum is asking. For example, in a language arts class, you can see something like a revise outcome. And that can make it difficult because it's hard to say something like revise 76% or even revise B, because it's hard to be able to say, here's what that means to communicate that well for what a struggle would be. And so on our outcome-based report card, we try to use a scale that will say, here's how well they are doing with that outcome. And we'll talk about that scale in the very next video. And then the last thing I want to point out here too, with outcome-based report cards, one of the things that we really want to be careful is the point of a teacher's assessment is actually to compare a student's against the expectations of the curriculum. We really want to be careful that we're not comparing students to other students, which is why you won't see something like a class average on our Raymond Elementary School report card, because as soon as there's a class average, what we're actually saying is, here's how well your student is doing compared to another student, and we don't want to do that. Alberta says, here's where we want the students to be by this grade, and our report cards say, here's where they are according to those expectations.